My name is Christy Wolf, and this is the first time that I've asked somebody to be with me to record kind of a conversation about what it's like going into a digital story. So, Tina, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about you and your story.
Yeah. Well, I'm a counselor. I'm a clinical counselor, and I work primarily with young adults, teenagers, parents, families. And so through the course of meeting Christy, um, I
Which we
became.
did. We have to do a little shout out here. We did meet through Canmore together.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And being new to Canmore, it was a great opportunity to meet some amazing women doing amazing things. And so through that process of meeting Christy, we started to dialogue about storytelling and the power of storytelling. And so that is really dear to my heart, because through the therapeutic process, of course, storytelling is a big part of that process. Sharing stories, sharing experiences, sharing narratives, which is our stories, our dialogue about our lived experience. Past experiences, regrets, present, how we're coping, how we're not coping, or our hopes and dreams for the future. And storytelling is such a powerful medium for the healing journey. And so for me, that hit close to home. It's my own personal story and journey that I've been through, and shared, and as well, sharing other people's stories.
I love it. That's exactly it. And we
Okay.
have I'm making her do this conversation. So Tina's like, okay, great, let's do this. This is super fun. But we've already talked about this a fair bit. Tina has already come on a digital storytelling info session with me, so she knows a lot about it. She was interested in doing the story, and then I just kind of nudged her into the idea of like, let's share this process so other people can see it. But I think that's it. We have had long conversations already about what it looks like, how you're feeling about telling your story. It's not like it is a bit nerve-wracking. And I get that, especially if we're recording it. So will you talk a bit more about why, like what drew you to digital storytelling in the first place?
I think you mean in terms of.
Or with me specifically, like what made you think, oh, I'm even going to come to that digital storytelling info session? I want to find out a bit more about it.
Right. I think two-part, really. I think, if I put on my personal hat,
Yeah.
I was curious about the process, really the emotional process, the impact of telling your personal story. Not just telling it, publicly is a whole other thing, but telling it to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So going through the process of dialoguing, making sense, making meaning of whatever story that you have to tell personally is a very emotive process, a very powerful process. And I think I was really curious about that in a personal level, and of course, in a professional way as well, about what that would actually feel like, what would evolve within me as I went through this process with you. And I think the largest curiosity for me is what that's like. I've been on the other side helping people, walk through their journey, and tell their story and reframe it, change the narrative, or just sit in the narrative and be comfortable with it. But to go through it as a participant, with you, is a whole other level of experiencing it. And I wanted to experience that part of the journey. I wanted to immerse myself, maybe test myself in some way, maybe take a chance.
I love it.
Right. And really experience the power of what that's like. And through the digital format, I mean, storytelling is as old as time, really, right? And across cultures, across traditions, across generations, it's how we impart knowledge, it's how we connect, how we feel disconnected. It's a really powerful medium. But with the digital aspect, with the new technology aspect, it just takes it right to your home. It just brings it right into the personal space. It makes it so accessible.
Well, yeah, and I want to come back to the point that you made about like, this is not something that has to be shared. When people create a digital story, it is for them. The process is one of the things that I find the most therapeutic for me, thinking about just writing and taking photographs to tell a story. So I should mention that Tina is doing this publicly, but that is not the case. Like, I have people that have never shared their story other than with their immediate family, and that's perfect. So kind of that idea behind it, but also that process is exactly what we're talking about. Storyteller well-being is a really big part of the way digital storytelling is set up with common language digital storytelling and Mike Lang, who is who I'm doing my training with. But one of the things Mike and I talk about is that it's really important to have mental health supports in place. And so when Tina and I started talking about doing a digital story, I think having her opinion on this process, so that when I'm working with other people, I kind of have, I'm not a counselor. I am a photographer, I am a teacher, but I'm not a counselor. And I don't want that to come across, but I want to be able to support the people that are telling stories with me in the best way possible, and make sure that I guess my one-on-one sessions, but also group sessions as we're getting further into things, are set up in the best way to support the storyteller. Did you want to add anything to that?
I think it's great. I mean, I think, part of sharing story is holding space and holding hearts. And having met you, I know that you do that very well. So, I think it's wonderful that you're mindful about, those that participate and how they're really experiencing the process, and making sure that they're okay and feeling safe throughout the process, emotionally safe, physically safe in every way. So I think that's wonderful and ethical, and with integrity. But I have no doubt that you do that naturally. And I think, certainly going through the process, I'll be able to experience how you naturally do that. And I think
And that's also where I'm looking for feedback from you, because I would love to make it stronger. And knowing that you have a counseling practice, you've talked a little bit about how it fits. Do you want to add anything to how digital storytelling or storyteller well-being fits with counseling?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think telling stories, sharing stories is sharing narratives, right? Is really the core of counseling. It is holding space, is holding hearts. It is sharing in the story of those that I get the honor to work with, and who feel comfortable sharing their stories. Counseling is often a place, if it feels right, it's a place where you can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's a place where you can share, narratives and stories about your life that may be very difficult to share with other people, may be difficult to admit or share with yourself even. And so, that becomes a really sacred experience. And the more that I think about it, the more that you evolve with counseling, whether it's verbal storytelling or visual storytelling, art mediums, counseling in all kinds of different ways, music sharing. It's still a story. It's still your personal story, your emotional story, your cognitive story, your experiential story. It's all of those pieces. And so it is a natural it's a natural fit for the therapeutic process, because that is what we do. That's what we do. It's hold space for sharing story.
Which, can you guys tell why I'm excited to work on this? Because she's like totally speaking my language about just like how we get those stories out. And one of the things that, as Tina and I were talking more, and I found out that she works a lot with caregivers, the whole idea for me has always been, I was there too, seeing myself in photographs, seeing myself in our story, even though I often am telling a story about someone else. If I'm related to that story, I also need to see myself there. So that's a big part of storytelling for me. Tina, you're also a photographer. So this is exciting because, I mean, I know you're not necessarily a people photographer, but that eye for photography and that interest in images, I think, is what also draws people to digital storytelling. So I'm looking forward to like getting to pick your brain as we go. But my last question before we kind of sign off for this conversation is, how are you feeling right now about the process of digital storytelling? Because throughout our time together, because there'll be 4 sessions that we're spending time working on your story, I'm going to do check-ins with you. Just one word check-ins about how you're feeling. But right now you can spew as much as you want about how you're feeling going into this digital storytelling.
Anxious, of course. That's
Yeah.
that's the overall feeling. Excitement, but an anxious excitement, I guess, and fear, sure.
Yeah.
As a well, as an individual, but also as a clinician, I don't share my personal story. I mean, that's not sort of necessarily what's woven into the process, right? And so this is turning the tables, and that's exciting and nerve-wracking, and makes me feel vulnerable, right? It's a vulnerable feeling, exposed feeling in some way, the anticipation of it. But also really meaningful then, right? Because now I'm experiencing what it feels like to have share that vulnerability. And I think that's at the core of the healing of this process. I think that is most intriguing and exciting to me. And so, yeah, excited anxiety.
Okay, that is definitely fair. And then my next question would be, is there anything that you feel that I can do to help support that so that it doesn't get overwhelming?
I think just some understanding, maybe some patience as we go through this process, that, I could, share, and then maybe those instincts come back to pull back my sharing a little bit, not fully immerse in it, test the waters, create my safety in this space. And I think, just understanding and patience as I go through that and figure out what feels comfortable.
And I think, again, we've talked about this, that Tina might not share her most close to her heart stories because this is going to be public. So she's getting a feeling for what digital storytelling is, with almost, I don't want to say a practice story, but with perhaps not the story you would have told had this all been just for your own purposes. So something to keep in mind as well, that once you have told a digital story and gone through the process, you are set up to tell as many digital stories as you want to. And that's one of the things I want people to walk away with, that like knowledge of how to do this again for themselves, so that when they're ready to tell a new story, they are fully capable of doing that. So Tina, thank you for this
Thank you.
opening conversation.